So, and then there are others, but and then the final thing I guess I should mention is the L3C is increasingly being used by for-profit ventures that are unattached to 501c3s, purely for branding and positioning purposes. So in dealing with nonprofits, in dealing with government, in dealing with consumers, they can hold themselves out as a social enterprise by virtue of form, where their mission becomes paramount, and they may gain a competitive advantage, but their ethos is built into the DNA of the entity, and everybody who deals with them or wants to deal with them understands that. So that too is another important feature. We find that about half the L3Cs in the country, there are now something north of 600 L3Cs in the United States. About half of them are freestanding for-profit businesses. The other half are attached to 501c3s. And of those that are attached to 501c3s, roughly half of those are attached to pre-existing 501c3s, and the other half were creating 501c3s in tandem with the L3C. Now, why would we do that? If you look at the 501c3 and the L3C as one economic unit, indeed they are if you're talking about a subsidiary, the 501c, you can bifurcate missions such that the soft costs are found within the 501c3 and the more capital-intensive activities lodged within the L3C. In that fashion, you can have the 501c3 attract tax-deductible contributions from individuals and corporations as well as grants, and the L3C can peddle debt or equity and also can receive grants. So you will have tapped into every conceivable funding possibility within this economic unit. Then you can move the money around the system as and when needed fairly seamlessly and tax efficiently. So that's a model that has also gained some traction. So there are lots of different ways in which the L3C can be used today, and we're finding more and more of them in the fullness of time.
Very good. Have you guys found this helpful? Have you found this discussion
You're supposed to say
helpful?
yes now.
Yes? Yeah.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank
Great.
you.
Are there any questions from the audience? I think the first hand that went up is in back.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jack Dean. I think I can hear her. Thank you.
Jack, we hear you loud and clear, but I think they want to tape you.
On behalf of the cheap seats back here, you're playing very well back here in the last row. Mark, a question. It's really not, of course, for a legal opinion. It's really a legal perception, if I may. There's a phenomenal asset being contributed daily, which is time. I don't call it volunteerism. I call it time philanthropy.
Yes.
And I know there are very, very few organizations that don't rely at some level on the value of people giving time, giving expertise, giving advice, et cetera, boards of directors, for example. Yeah. And I'm not sure there's a very good accounting system for the value of that time, and I'm not sure there's that much of an incentive system to broaden that time philanthropy to various parts of the operation. So that's a long way of saying, do you think we may be able to, as entrepreneurs in the social arena, start to create more of a movement towards accounting for that time and its value, and then use that as an asset either for tax purposes for the contributor of that time, but I think more important, as a match for dollars that could go into the organization's management of the time and, of course, service to those we have for our mission. So my question is, have you been exposed to anything that accounts for the value of time, used to be called volunteerism, and what way can we go forward with that if you are interested in that idea?
Thank you. It's a very interesting idea. Yes, I have been exposed to the use of volunteer time as an asset. However, not in the balance sheet or income statement sense. Instead, and this allows me an opportunity to hit a hot button issue of mine, when looking at social performance of social enterprises, irrespective of form, I think that, and obviously this is an interesting and important area. The very last chapter of the book that Amy so aggressively plugged is called To What Ends? And that deals with the whole notion of measuring social performance as distinguished from merely activities, but rather outputs that are reasonable proxies for social impact. And this is an area of great interest and concern to me. But I do see organizations starting to promote, if we can use that word, the hours of volunteer time that they've accumulated as a social metric. And in managing the organization, I think that the directors or trustees should be mindful of that asset because without it, they might not function. And with it, they can function less expensively and more impactfully. Similarly, donors should be told the same story so that their dollars are being used more effectively given the significant volunteerism effort. And investors would also be, I think, very significantly persuaded by the quality of management and the extent to which mission is found to be compelling by third parties through the extent to which volunteerism can be encouraged and maintained. Further, regulators are now starting to look at social performance. The Benefit Corporation, for example, requires reporting, public reporting on social performance. And I think that volunteerism is one very reasonable and very important measure of social performance that benefit corporations will be relying upon. Similarly, the California Flexible Purpose Corporation has similar requirements, as does the Washington Social Purpose Corporation and others. So I think the whole notion of reporting on what you're doing, not only financially, but also in driving social change and the way in which you're utilizing assets effectively, I think is going to be a more and more important story for stakeholders upon which organizations are becoming increasingly dependent and to whom they become increasingly accountable. So I welcome the question and congratulations on your recognition of the importance of volunteerism.
Okay, we have about 2 more minutes left. We have time for one last question. Was there something in the back over here earlier? No? Anything else? We have one up in front here? Oh.
There's one over here, I know.
Well, you know what? Let's take both questions and
Okay.
we'll see what Mark can get to.
I think mine's quick. My name's Jeff Bachman. Has there been any discussion at the ABA or any of the legislatures on allowing organizations such as law firms who can't have private investments but also have what I consider a social mission to perhaps form as an L3C?
Yes, that's an interesting area, and obviously there are some law firms that focus on providing services to people outside the economic mainstream. They can, in fact, be organized as a 501c3, as a legal support agency, but that's a 501c3, not a for-profit. I can give you one example of my own knowledge, and that is my law firm has an affiliated L3C. And that L3C is used for educational purposes, publications and seminaring and the like, around the whole notion of deploying capital for both social and financial returns, whether it be the PRI, mission-related investing, impact investing, socially responsible investing and the like. The whole notion of having non-attorneys invest in law firms is problematic. Because as lawyers we're held to a specific standard, and when we now become accountable to non-lawyers, we end up in a position where the two objectives tend to collide. So that's really the kind of the ethical tension there. But it's an interesting point. I think it's likely to occur through affiliates of the law firms rather than the law firms themselves, and that's the way we've pursued it.
Okay. Let's try to squeeze in one last question over here.
Hi, thank you. If a group of individuals is going to form a company, a for-profit company, and the sole purpose is to help charities, a percentage of every sale of the product goes back to charities, and they're also paying the charities that have production centers to make the products. Would you suggest they do an LC3 or just set it up as a regular for-profit?
Yeah, an L3C won't work because the purpose you've described is not itself considered charitable. In order for it to be charitable, it has to earn its money through a charitable purpose rather than having the proceeds dedicated to a charitable purpose. Otherwise, you could have any form of business where a portion of its profits are dedicated to charity through cause-related marketing, for example, and then bootstrap it to a charitable status unto itself. So it needs to be through the delivery of services, the employment of people outside the economic mainstream, the delivery of products which themselves have a social purpose, rather than saying that, hey, we're going to make some money and dedicate it to charity. So I would say you're left in plain old traditional for-profit land.
Okay.
But thank you. It's a very important thing you're doing.
Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up. Marc, thank you so much.
Thank you,
for your
Amy. You
work
were
in
very
this
gentle with
field.
me, and I do appreciate it. Thanks,
we're,
guys.
We're really indebted to you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you. Very much enjoyed it.